that I want to be number one. Little did I know that I would, It's hard to imagine that now because we're so far removed from it that it's almost hard to percent. I think sports has always been on the front of social change.
Martina Navratilova watched it happen live, and even she looked genuinely shocked. A 20-year-old losing a first-round match at the 2026 Australian Open drew thousands of fans queuing outside Court 6 for over an hour, with many never even making it inside.
What makes a champion? Anything. It's the same old, champions don't quit until they get it right. They're the first ones in the gym and the last ones to leave.
And that level of raw crowd pull around a simple exit caught Navratilova completely off guard. It was only the beginning of something far bigger building beneath the surface. Because that same unstoppable energy followed Eala straight into the commercial world.
I've only dreamed of making tennis grow in the Philippines, and now I'm bringing a whole new audience to tennis all around the world.
Nike had already dropped a limited edition jersey with Filipino heritage woven into every thread, and what that design triggered in sales shattered a massive record that no one saw coming, leaving the WTA, the sponsors, and Navratilova herself without a single explanation. Even this week, after Alex Eala suffered a brutal 6-0, 6-2 loss to Karolina Muchova at the Miami Open and crashed from her career-best number 29 down to number 45 overnight. The commercial momentum hasn't slowed by a single step. ESPN is already calling it the Eala Tour. She's destroying something on a level this sport rarely sees, and it has nothing to do with the scoreboard. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button right now, because this channel covers what mainstream tennis media refuses to touch.
Eala from the Philippines could be the next big thing in pro tennis.
This was a massive spot to be in for such a young talent, to have a sold-out crowd completely behind.
To do well on the WTA Tour. I'm super proud of what I was able to accomplish, but the end goal is to win Slam.
The answer sits inside one massive jersey sales record, one that no one saw coming, one that even Navratilova couldn't explain. Let's get into exactly what got destroyed. Here's the thing about the Nike jersey. It wasn't launched with the kind of fanfare you'd expect around a record-breaking product. There was no Super Bowl-style campaign, no global billboard rollout. Nike released a limited edition shirt designed by Manila-based artist Georgina Camus, featuring the sampaguita, the national flower of the Philippines, set against the grass courts of Wimbledon. It was cultural, personal, quiet almost. Park Access, the official Nike retailer for the Philippines, listed it online alongside a tote bag and a ball cap as part of the Nike By You in Full Bloom collection. And then the Filipino diaspora found it. What happened next wasn't a slow build. The collection moved at a speed that caught Nike's own retail partners off guard. For context, women's tennis merchandise has historically been one of the harder commercial categories to shift at volume outside of Grand Slam windows. Players ranked outside the top 10 rarely generate the kind of sustained merchandise demand that triggers internal sales conversations at a brand the size of Nike. Eala wasn't even in the top 50 when the shirt dropped in August 2025. She had just reached her first WTA Tour final at Eastbourne and won her first WTA 125 title in Guadalajara. Genuinely impressive results, but nothing that typically moves merchandise at the speed this collection moved.
She's being told X, Y, and Z, and I don't think.
Of course, the atmosphere in each tournament has been amazing, and it's been a different start this year than any other year I've ever had. So
the massive sales record that got destroyed here wasn't just about raw units. It was about the speed of sell-through for a limited edition item tied to a player at Eala's ranking level. Inside Nike's regional retail structure, that kind of velocity from a non-top 10, non-Grand Slam winning athlete is essentially unheard of. The comparison being drawn internally, according to industry sources cited by Tennis 365, was to the Li Na collection Nike launched in 2017, a player who had already won 2 Grand Slams by that point. Eala had won 0. That context is what made the number so jarring. To understand why that jersey sold the way it did, you have to understand what the 12 months leading up to its release actually looked like for Alex Eala. Because the commercial story didn't start with the shirt. It started in Miami. March 2025. Eala enters the Miami Open, ranked 141st in the world on a wild card. She defeats Jelena Ostapenko in the second round. Then Madison Keys, ranked 5th at the time, falls in straight sets. Then, Iga Swiatek, the two-time defending champion at that point, goes down in one of the most electric upsets of the entire 2025 WTA season.
Eala, the phenomenon. We didn't know, largely, the tennis community a year ago before her run in Miami, and now it's must-see TV and drawing maybe the biggest crowds anyone outside of Alcaraz, Sinner, and the like.
Tournaments are such great experiences for me, especially playing in front of the best crowd ever. And
a 20-year-old wild card from the Philippines, trained at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca, suddenly standing in the semi-final of a WTA 1000 event on American soil. The Filipino community in Miami lost its collective mind, and the Filipino diaspora, watching from every time zone on Earth, lost it with them. That single tournament run didn't just change Eala's ranking, it rewired how an entire nation related to tennis. The Philippines is a country where basketball has dominated the sporting conversation for generations. Tennis existed on the periphery, a sport for the privileged few rather than a national obsession. Within 72 hours of Eala's Swiatek upset going viral, Google search trends for women's tennis in the Philippines spiked to levels the platform had never recorded for the country. Broadcast rights conversations that had been stagnant for years suddenly became urgent. The WTA took notice in a way it hadn't before. By the time Eala made her Grand Slam main draw debut at the French Open in May 2025, she wasn't just a promising young player anymore. She was carrying the weight of an entire nation's sporting identity on a left-handed serve that Navratilova would later publicly describe as the one area needing the most improvement.
This was definitely one of the bigger Filipino turnouts. Also, New York was huge. It also depends what court you're on, that you feel the noise and things.
That gap between her cultural footprint and her on-court ranking was the most unusual thing happening anywhere in professional tennis, and it created a commercial opportunity that Nike moved on faster than anyone else. When Navratilova spoke on Tennis Channel after the 2026 Australian Open first-round match, the specific thing that shocked her wasn't the crowd size in isolation. Large crowds happen. What caught her, and what she articulated clearly in that broadcast, was the context surrounding it. This was a first-round match, on court 6, against a player ranked outside the top 90 at the time, and the queue outside that court stretched further than the queues outside stadiums hosting top 10 players on the same day. Navratilova's exact words were measured but telling. She said the organizers needed to keep the players' fan base in mind when making scheduling decisions, pointing specifically to the size of the Filipino audience in Melbourne and across Australia.
We're not concerned about anyone else right now. It's Alex Eala time. This is Alex Eala's moment. Our days, our dinners, our evenings are fixated on when she's playing. That's real tennis fandom right there. Love it.
This is so great for tennis in general.
Yeah.
I think having players like Alex out there, and she's so gracious to all her fans. She spends time with her fans, signs the autographs, takes the photos, and really just shows the Filipino community that it is all about the Philippines. And I still carry that flag with me no matter where I go across the world.
Lindsay Davenport went further, saying Eala probably needed to be on a bigger show court, describing her as likely the most famous female athlete in Philippine sporting history. For two legends of that stature to redirect an entire post-match broadcast conversation away from the result and toward the crowd logistics surrounding a first-round loser, that's the moment that crystallized just how far beyond the rankings Eala's cultural reach had grown. The live stream of Eala's post-match press conference that day drew over 100,000 views. Aryna Sabalenka's press conference from the world number one at her home Grand Slam drew fewer. Carlos Alcaraz's drew fewer. Those are not tennis metrics, those are pop culture metrics. And they explain more clearly than any sales figure why the Nike jersey sold the way it did. The commercial ripple from all of this extends well beyond one shirt. Eala's current sponsor roster, Nike, Babolat, Globe Telecom, Bank of the Philippine Islands, Locally Juice, and Milo, added in February 2026, represents a brand portfolio that most players ranked between 30 and 60 in the world simply don't carry. The valuation logic behind each of those partnerships isn't built on her ranking, it's built on her reach. Sky Sports lead presenter Gigi Salmon put it plainly at a Tennis 365 event in London earlier this year, saying that in terms of appeal and the crowds following her, Eala might already be the biggest star in the sport. That's a genuinely bold claim to make about a player sitting outside the top 30, but the data behind it is harder to argue with than the statement itself. Industry sources tracked by Tennis 365 and Yahoo Sports have confirmed that A-list companies beyond her current portfolio are actively in conversations about Eala as a brand ambassador. The comparison being drawn most frequently is to Emma Raducanu following her 2021 US Open win, a player whose commercial value exploded almost entirely on the basis of a single tournament run and a story that resonated globally. Eala has sustained that kind of narrative energy across a full calendar year without a Grand Slam title, which in commercial terms is arguably the more impressive achievement. Raducanu had a trophy. Eala has something harder to manufacture, a fan base that shows up regardless of the result. The WTA itself responded to this energy in November 2025 by announcing the creation of the Philippine Women's Open, a WTA 125 event held in Manila in January 2026. It was the Philippines' first WTA tournament in history. Tickets for the final sold out before Eala had even confirmed her participation. That's the commercial footprint of what's happening here. A single player generating enough demand to birth an entirely new tournament in a country that had never hosted one.
But I'm a person, and I feel like, people will like you for who you are if you are true to yourself. And
These tournaments are such great experiences for me, especially playing in front of the best crowd ever, and I do my best. I do what I can, and just if I see an opening.
So young, and she's just coming through, so and obviously the first couple rounds, the schedule is so packed.
The tension at the center of the Alex Eala story in 2026 is the gap between what the WTA rankings say and what the broader tennis world is experiencing. As of March 30th, she sits at number 45 after that Miami exit, the biggest single-week ranking drop of any player in that update. She lost 270 net points by failing to defend her 2025 semifinal run, falling 6-0, 6-2 to Karolina Muchova in under 60 minutes. It was a difficult watch for anyone invested in her progress, but Navratilova's assessment of where the weaknesses actually sit gives the loss some technical context. Speaking to the WTA ahead of Indian Wells, she identified the serve as the central area holding Eala back, noting that her slight build makes absorbing pace from bigger hitters a genuine physical challenge, and that her kick serve needs more development to compete at the top tier consistently. The slice is already elite level by Navratilova's reading. The variety and courtcraft are genuinely impressive for a 20-year-old. The ceiling, in Navratilova's framing, is high. The serve is simply the door standing between where Eala is now and where she could realistically go. She's now heading into the European clay swing with the Linz Open in Austria from April 6th to 12th as her next scheduled event. Clay is a surface she openly describes as her biggest area for development. With 0 ranking points to defend across the clay season, every result from here until Roland Garros is pure upside. A chance to rebuild the ranking without the pressure of protecting previous results. A semi-final finish in Linz alone would push her back toward the top 30. A title would take her to a new career high somewhere around number 23. What Martina Navratilova was really reacting to at the Australian Open, and what the Nike jersey sales record represents in concrete commercial terms, is something the sport hasn't quite had the language for yet. Eala exists in a category that women's tennis hasn't really produced before. She's a player whose cultural significance has outpaced her ranking by a margin that makes the usual frameworks for measuring a tennis career feel inadequate.
When did you realize you were representing something much bigger?
In Melbourne, I saw a couple clips of the lines and the people.
I think the international interest in both of them is so high, and quite a thrill ride for her this last year as well. She had some great results.
The athletes she's being compared to aren't just tennis players. Gian Castillejo, a Filipino sports journalist and former tennis player, has said Eala is already being treated in the Philippines like a multiple Grand Slam winner. The comparison to Manny Pacquiao, in terms of the national emotional investment her career generates, keeps surfacing across Philippine sports media, and it isn't hyperbole. Pacquiao didn't just win fights, he gave an entire country a reason to feel seen on the world stage at a time when that feeling was rare. Eala is doing the same thing through a racket. ESPN's decision to frame her phenomenon as the Eala Tour, a direct reference to Taylor Swift's Eras Tour in terms of the devotion and logistical chaos her presence generates at tournaments, isn't a throwaway line. It's an acknowledgement that what's happening around Alex Eala operates by different rules than conventional tennis stardom. The fans don't come because she's winning. They come because of what she represents, and that's precisely why no one saw this coming, because the tennis world had no model for it. A massive jersey sales record getting destroyed by a player outside the top 50 with a limited edition cultural design distributed through a single regional retailer without a Grand Slam title attached to it. That outcome was statistically implausible by every historical benchmark the industry had. And yet it happened because the numbers were never really about the shirt. They were about 114 million people watching one of their own compete on the biggest stages in the world and wanting something tangible to hold on to while they watched. That's the full story behind what Martina Navratilova couldn't hide her surprise about, and why the massive jersey sales record Alex Eala effectively destroyed is genuinely unlike anything women's tennis has produced at this stage of a career before. The ranking will fluctuate. The clay season starts fresh in April, but the cultural wave behind her isn't tied to a ranking update, and that's the part no one saw coming. If you found this breakdown useful, subscribe to the channel right now. We cover the angles on professional tennis that the mainstream broadcast conversation consistently leaves on the table. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Eala can push back into the top 30 before Roland Garros, or does the clay swing expose the same physical limitations Navratilova flagged? We'll be tracking every result between now and the French Open. See you in the next one.